Hello, welcome back to another episode of Awakening with Grace. I'm so glad you are joining me today. And on this week's episode, I really just wanted to jump into how I got started on my own spiritual journey and what this whole process of awakening has looked like for me. Because while everybody's journey individually is different, I think there's a lot of similarities too, and a lot of things that we can take away from looking at my own personal experience. But for me, this whole journey didn't even start out overtly spiritual. It really started the moment I started choosing for myself versus what everybody else in my life had told me what to do. Many of you have probably heard the story already, but my parents are Korean immigrants. They came here to this country with 2 suitcases and $500 in cash, and that was it. So their goal for their children was to have stable, financially secure lives. In Korea, my dad was an engineer and a teacher, and my mom was a nurse. And in America, they became dry cleaners. And it was a very, very hard job. They only got 1 week off for the entire year for vacation, and they worked 6 days a week. And it was just a really hard job. They did not want that for their children. So their idea of financial security was for us to go into law or medicine. I got my degree in science. I was the good Asian daughter. I was going to go off to med school or vet school. And I decided to not do that. And I decided to move 3,000 miles away from home with my science degree and pursue a career in advertising as an art director, and went back to art school for the first time. And really, that choice, that one choice right there, changed everything for me, because it was a moment where I chose what felt internally right for me, what was aligned for me versus what everybody else thought I should be doing. Not even just my parents. Obviously, they're a huge influence, but I remember in college, people thought I was crazy. It's like, why did you just waste the last 4 years? What are you doing? Why are you moving all the way to San Francisco? I was living in around Philadelphia at the time. That's where I grew up. So that one choice of kind of quieting down all the external noise outside of me and really going inward and identifying what it is that I wanted and then taking action from there, that was the pivotal moment. And I think that math right there, listening deeply internally to what it is that you want and then taking action, is the mechanism for awakening. And I have consistently done that very thing over and over and over again for the last 20 years of my life. So I went to art school, went through that whole thing, and I did end up working in the advertising industry as an art director. And while it was fun, and while I got to prove my parents wrong that you can make money being a creative person, it was such a bad fit for me. It was such a hard, toxic environment, especially for a young woman, especially for somebody who's an empath and very sensitive. I was so miserable. I was so unhappy. I remember one night it was like 12 a.m. and I'm driving home from work, and I said, you know what, getting in a car accident right now would be pretty great, because I don't have to go to work tomorrow if I get in a car accident. Once I realized what I had just said, that I would rather be in a car accident and be in the hospital so I don't have to go to work, that is when I realized, hold on a second here, I need to make a change. I got to figure out what it is I want to do. And I need help. Help me. I don't even know if I knew who I was talking to at the time. God, the universe. I don't know. I just said, help me. I need help. I'm not happy. This cannot go on. And there was a little whisper that said, get a camera. And I said, okay, I'm going to go get a camera. I bought a camera. I had just adopted my first dog, and I started taking pictures of this doggy. And that led to me putting an ad up on Craigslist to find a dog rescue to take photos of their adoptable dogs to help them get adopted. And the rest is history. Again, in that moment, I realized something is wrong. I need to make a shift. I cannot continue. Let me make that change. And it was a very small step. It wasn't dramatic, like, Grace, you better quit your job, or you better end up somewhere you're happier, or that's a better fit. It was so small. It was, why don't you get a camera? I think it's so interesting the way the universe speaks to us, because it is in whispers. The higher you go up in consciousness, the thinner that energy gets. It gets more subtle. And so our higher self, the universe, your soul, your spirit, whatever it is that you want to call this energy that is around us all the time, in deep relationship with us all the time. It communicates with us all the time, but it is subtle and it is quiet. Imagine the denser energy is like this table. It's easier to perceive, to touch, to feel with all of your 3D senses, but your intuition, your spirit, the universe, it is a higher consciousness, and that density gets thinner and lighter. It's like ice versus steam, right? So it's quieter, and it's really learning to pay attention and tune into that, because these whispers come from so deep within us, and it is on us again to listen and then have the courage to take action. It is like a little breadcrumb, because in that moment it was just get a camera. I did that, and then my whole life changed. It became a side hustle. I immediately got my first cover of a magazine, and then I had a huge ad agency reach out to me. When you pick up that breadcrumb, something really interesting happens. The analogy I like to use is like when I was working in advertising, I was doing well. I was winning awards. I had an ad campaign I worked on that went viral before going viral was even a word. I was doing well, but what it felt like was I'm in a river and I am using all of my strength to swim upstream. I'm doing it. I'm going upstream. I didn't drown, but it took so much of my own effort and will to do it. Versus once I picked up this little breadcrumb about get a camera, picked up another one, post on Craigslist, picked up another breadcrumb, start that pet photography business, picked up another one saying eventually quit your full-time job and try this full-time. Each little breadcrumb, it felt like I was getting into the river, but going with the flow. That's what happens when you start aligning with what is for you and right for you. You're aligning with a current that your soul is meant to be going with. And so it felt almost like, I mean, it's not like it wasn't hard work, but there was some other force, like the current in a river, that was also working with me as I continued on this path. So this is a really big part of my awakening, because as I was listening and responding, I'm starting to realize, wait, I am in relationship with something much larger than me here. I am doing something, taking action, and all these things are opening up for me. And so the next pivotal moment for me was when I did ultimately decide to quit my advertising job, but I was still working freelance. So I literally had one foot in the world of advertising still and one foot in the world of pet photography. And I was walking down Abbot Kinney Boulevard one day, and there was a psychic spiritual bookstore there. And I thought to myself, if there's a psychic in this bookstore, I'm going to talk to her. And that decision felt terrifying for me, because I was brought up to believe that anything to do with psychics, anything outside of the Christian church, is devil worshiping and demonic. That is what my mom ingrained into me. Any exploration outside of Jesus and the church was devil worshiping. But my intuition said, hey, why don't you go in here and see what this is all about? And there was a psychic there that day. She happened to have availability as soon as I walked in. I had my very first psychic reading with her, and she just described everything that I had been experiencing up to that point, the 1 foot in, 1 foot out. She said she just saw me like catching everything it was that I wanted, and that I was 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and I really needed to make a choice. And then she also invited me to her intuitive development class. And so after that, I started going to her apartment and doing intuitive development classes where we learned to dialogue with the universe. Literally, that's what she called it, dialoguing with the universe. We learned how to be in relationship with the universe. And that's really where my own reconnecting to my own intuitive abilities really started opening up. I remember I would always have my journal with me, and she told me, you are like a magical manifester, because I swear every time you write something down in that little journal of yours, it comes true. And so that was just so interesting to have a teacher validate something like that about me. She's not wrong, by the way. I don't say this to like brag, but it feels almost like objective fact that I am a magical manifester, and I will share with you. You have any questions about this? I'm happy to answer them. I will do workshops. I will do episodes on this. So yes, so I really started developing those abilities. And then not too long after that, I decided to go and take an animal communication workshop just because I had never heard of it. This was like 2009. I had never even heard of animal communication. And a pet photography client of mine told me that her 3-year-old son was an animal communicator and that her really good friend was a professional animal communicator. And the two of them would like talk to animals and find lost cats and stuff together. And I'm just like, what are you even talking about? This is amazing. This exists. And so I ended up taking a class because once I found myself intrigued by this idea, oh, this is a thing I didn't know existed. Let me go explore it. That is another really important part of awakening to yourself and to your own abilities and to plugging back into your true nature of being a powerful, infinite, soulful being. When you get these little, that sounds interesting, that's a whisper. And you are meant to go explore that because there is something there. I have been doing this now for almost 2 decades. And I can tell you, if you're interested in something, it's for a very good reason. What I have come to understand now is that what you like now in this lifetime is something that you have liked in all your lifetimes. You have brought that with you. You bring this energy, this pattern of energy with you in every lifetime because it is one of your gifts. So when you're interested in something and you get that little nudge, it's because you're remembering a part of yourself. And it's like you had amnesia about it or something and it's starting to come back online. So for me, it was this, animal communication. What the heck is that? Let me check that out. How is it that I discover one of the godmothers of animal communications? Her name was Carol Gurney. I think she's like wrote her book in the 80s or something. And of course, it turns out she lives not that far from me. And at the time she was doing animal communication workshops in her house. And I think it's so interesting how when you learn to work with the universe, it is a language. And one of the things I have found so consistently is within the breadcrumb, there's another breadcrumb. It's like inception of breadcrumbs because this woman, Carol Gurney, who lives not that far from me, and I can go to her house and learn in person, she used to work in advertising, and she was a very high level person working in advertising until she decided to put that career away and then do this animal communication thing. So this is what I mean. Sometimes I feel like the universe makes it so obvious, like this is what you're meant to do, explore this. And so I got to go to her house. It was a weekend workshop. And at that workshop, she tells me, you've been doing animal communication this entire time. That's how you get the pictures that you've been getting with your animal photography. And I was just like, that makes a lot of sense. That really makes a lot of sense. And that's when my animal communication really started opening up. But again, this was like in 2009, 2010. And I was so scared to talk about any of this stuff because I have this like subconscious programming of this whole world is devil worshiping. I have this fear of what are all the people back home in Philadelphia going to think about me? Crazy Grace, who moved across the country to California, is now a devil worshiper. She's gone off the deep end, truly. And then also just like thinking about the people working in advertising and what are they all going to think? It was so much of the fear and shame around the judgment of what is everyone going to think of me? And that fear actually got validated because around this time, so let's say this was like probably around like 2011 or 2012, I had a production company reach out to me and they wanted to develop a television show around my career. This was like peak Bravo TV era where Jeff Lewis had his decorating show and Rachel Zoe had her fashion show. So think of like a Bravo TV show with like the wacky pet photographer. This is a story for a whole nother day. It was a very strange experience. And let me tell you, reality is so fake. They wanted the entire thing constructed, like get her a fake office, get her fake assistants, make fake drama. I'm so glad that didn't happen, by the way. Thank God. That would have been the worst thing in my life to have my own reality show. Oh my God. But I remember telling the producers, by the way, I'm an animal communicator. Is this something that you want me to mention on video? Because what we were doing is we were developing a sizzle reel, which is basically a few minutes of a potential show, like a trailer. It's like a show trailer that you're going to now use to pitch to networks to get a deal. And I said, do you want me to mention this at any point? And they said, do not mention that. Don't. No, no, never. And all that did was affirm all the feelings I had of, wow, you're weird. That's weird. That's crazy. Nobody wants to hear that about you. And so I just kept stuffing that ability down. And my first meditation teacher was writing a book, and it came out in 2015. I think it's called Honor Your Spirit. I can't remember. If I can find it, I'll link it in the show notes. But she wrote a book, and she asked me if she could include me as a case study in the book about me learning to tune into my own intuition and having all of my gifts and abilities open up as a result of that as an animal communicator. And I said, no. I said, no. If you write Grace the Animal Photographer in your book, everybody will know what you're talking about because I am one of one, Grace the Animal Photographer. No, I don't need people knowing this about me. So she changed my identity, bless her soul, to Georgette, the landscape designer in this book. I'm sorry. I guess that doesn't really quite have the same ring as being an animal photographer. I'm sorry, Carolyn. The story wasn't as good as it could have been, but I was too scared. And so I kept all of this just stuffed down and hidden. But at the same time that I am building my photography career, because by this point, I have stopped doing the retail pet photography and I have moved on to the world of commercial pet photography. So it's like working with individual families versus working with an advertising agency. You work way less and get paid way more. So like the math, duh. I was still building that, and that career was doing very well. But at the same time, I was building my own spiritual practice, because the thing with a creative career is that it is so unknown. And I have to say, leaning on really, really gifted intuitives and psychics and healers helped me so much at this point in my career, because I still was working on healing. I still was working on confronting all of my own fears and limitations around what I thought was possible. Can I make money at this? Can I have a sustainable career? All of the scarcity and the competition and the constant rejection. You know, when you're auditioning and you're an actor and you're getting rejected all the time, you have to realize commercial photography is really not that different. It's constant rejection. The audition is when the agency reaches out to you, asks for a treatment, asks to get on a creative call with you. You do your whole dog and pony show, tell them why they should pick you, and then they don't. And then you feel like utter poop and you make it all about yourself. I mean, the rejection and the sting every time that would come from that was really, really, really hard. And learning how to be with myself and stay with myself and support myself while also cultivating this relationship with this bigger thing that I also knew was supporting me. That is what I mean when I say my spiritual practice and my relationship with the universe is what truly kept me on my path, because it was through the pursuit of my own healing and confronting all of those limiting beliefs, all of those thoughts I had about myself of not being good enough, not being worthy. Every time I got rejected, all the sting that would come up, the fear around money, my scarcity mindset, everything I got inherited from my parents with their immigrant money mentality, all of that was opportunity for me to go deeply inward and do the best work I could on my inside so I could stay on the path and do my best work on the outside, as I always used to say back on creativity school. So it was truly when everything felt so unknown that learning how to go deeply inward to myself and also going to people who were so deeply gifted and getting answers from them and validation when things felt so scary and just in the dark was so deeply helpful to not just feel like I was on the right path, but also just in learning more about myself. Because one of the things I find so interesting now that I am an Akashic reader and an animal communicator, I experience this all the time with my clients, but also experiencing it as the person receiving the reading. It is really powerful to have a powerful reading because you know, okay, you know, you have spidey senses. You have spidey senses. You know just things. I know you know. Just by the fact that you're listening to this show, I know you know. I know you're deeply intuitive. I know you pick up on things. I know you know what your gifts are and where you're supposed to go. It's the fear holding you back from really allowing yourself to believe it. And when you hear somebody who doesn't know you tell you and reflect back to you these things that you've already known, that is what is so powerful. And I feel like that in and of itself helps you realize, like, I'm not crazy. I kind of already knew this stuff. Wait, this person who doesn't even know me is telling me this stuff. And then everything else that they're telling you becomes so much more digestible and believable. There was this whole period of intense spiritual growth for me in this time where it was really hard. It was really hard growing my business as a commercial photographer. I became a mom at that time too. So there was just a lot of growth happening there. And as I continue, eventually I started the podcast. That was another really big part of my own awakening because as I kept growing, remember, your growth is like a spiral that goes up and out. Your consciousness grows as a spiral that goes up and out. And so it starts deeply within as you're reconnecting to yourself and you're doing all the kinds of healing and exploring that I just spoke to you about. As that evolution continues to grow up and out, what happened for me is that I started realizing I want to help other people. I've learned so much on this journey. How can I help other people? And I really think that is a part of the awakening process where as you continue to grow, it's going to start expanding up and out and start including other people because your heart begins to expand. As you get more internally connected and resourced into yourself, it grows here. It reaches your heart starts to expand. And so for me, I reached another point where I'm like, what am I supposed to do? I'm not really sure. Am I supposed to go back to school for writing? I started art school as a writer, by the way. So I'm like, am I supposed to go back and be a writer? Am I supposed to be a life coach? And when my intuition heard podcast, I cried because I knew it was right. I knew deep down before my brain could jump in my body, I knew that was right. And then my brain kicked in and I cried because that was the most terrifying thing at that point that I could have done, to be so vulnerable and open and exposing. You know, as a photographer, you don't see me. It's not me. You're seeing the work. I get to hide behind the camera. And so that's why when I started this podcast back in 2019, I spoke a lot about how scary it was. That's another thing to pay attention to on your awakening journey, my friends, because that fear is there because it means something. If it didn't mean something, it wouldn't scare you. You wouldn't care. You'd be like, whatever. It's a blip, right? But your soul knows. Your spirit knows. That's where your growth edge is. Your fear is your growth edge. It is your opportunity to level up. When you get to the other side of that fear, it is a leveling up and it is a you moving more into your true nature, your frequency. We all have our own individual frequency. Nobody else has your own frequency. We're born with it. It's the same frequency through all our lifetimes. It doesn't change. And there's only one. This is why everybody has a different fingerprint, because energy impacts form. So even twins have different fingerprints because though they may be the same genetically, they have different energies and spirits. So when you do all the things that I've been talking about thus far, what you're doing is clearing the static to allow yourself to step more back into your original frequency. And when you do scary ass shit, you are clearing more static to get more in alignment with your original frequency. I hope this is making sense. So when you're very, very, very scared about something, it's because there is a growth opportunity for you there to step into your power. And that can only come as a result of facing that fear and walking through it. And I have done that so many times now at this point that I just know now when it's that scary, it's something that I got to support myself through. It's something that I love myself through and support myself through. And I also know I'm not alone as I'm going through that. And I know that there is a huge, huge gift on the other side of walking through that. So that's what the podcast was. And it's only continued. The podcast was like the first step toward my own visibility and being able to speak to you this openly and transparently because as I mentioned on the last episode, what has happened is this growth has extended now to being more public about my spirituality and what I know and my understanding of all of this and coming forth publicly online, on social media, and even allowing this show to grow and develop in ways that, I mean, I never would have imagined I'd be online talking about aliens and Akashic records. And I've just been talking about whatever it is that I feel like talking about on social media for the last year and a half. And if you had told me that back in 2019, I would have thought you were crazy. But it's a good thing. The universe knows better than us because these little breadcrumbs allow us to grow and evolve like little babies. I don't think our awakening has to happen like snap of a finger overnight, at least certainly not for me. I think because I'm always listening and responding in these tiny little steps, I've never had that kind of moment where everything kind of like fell apart and I rebuilt. Everybody has a different kind of awakening story, by the way. And guess what? It's right. Whatever your story is the right story because it's the one that you were meant to have. So as you're listening to me tell my story, mine is very gradual because I've thought about this a lot, actually. I think mine has been very gradual because I have been listening and taking action since 2003 when I was 22 years old. And it's always been this process of my whole life has been a journey of me trying to become more of myself through every phase of my life. That's been true. And everybody is different. So some people have a midlife crisis. Some people reach a point where they have a divorce and that's the moment where everything changes for them, or someone they love passes away and something changes for them. But we have these opportunities where we get to take stock of who we really are. How do we be more aligned with that? And how does our external world reflect that? So for me, it's just been this constant evolution now of coming forward more publicly and openly and transparently about this aspect of me, which is so very real. If you know me in private, everybody knows, oh, I'm deeply, deeply spiritual. And this is the stuff I think about and talk about all the time. But online, I never really showed that part of me until fairly recently. So it feels very liberating for me this is part of my own awakening journey. It was learning to be comfortable showing all of me, showing all parts of me, not being afraid of being rejected, not being afraid of being judged, not being afraid to show who I am. So that's been huge. And what I also find interesting is that I don't know if you've looked into your astrology or looked at your birth chart. We're going to go into this on the show because I only got into astrology maybe 3 years ago. And it's been like mind blowing to me how it is such a reflection of your soul's blueprint and what your potential and possibility is if you listen and take action from there. It's crazy. And everything in my chart for my North Node, your North Node is your soul's destiny, where your soul wants to grow, where your soul wants to move into. Guess what mine is? It's all about being seen. It's all about being vulnerable. It's all about community and allowing myself to just shine. So it makes so much sense that if that is the trajectory of my soul in this incarnation, that to be seen and not visible and that public about it would be the absolute scariest thing. The design of all of this is so interesting, isn't it? Because we only learn through contrast. So it's like, in order for me to get over that hump and get to where my soul has been designed to want to go, I had to move through all this fear of being able to do this with you guys. That's like a really, really high level version of my awakening story. I think what is so fun about all of this is that our growth and exploration and evolution is infinite. I think that's exciting that our possibility to step into our superpowers and to really be the limitless souls that we are here on earth now in these bodies, that's very exciting. And that potential for that is infinite. You can keep going. So even in the last 4 years, while I've been exploring all of this and the 3 years I've been away from the podcast, more of my abilities have continued to open up. And I think what happens as we move back into our original frequency, we move back into who we really are because we've started reconnecting to ourselves, reconnecting to the earth, reconnecting to our higher power, our source, our guides, reconnecting to everybody. What happens through that reconnection process is like you're plugging back in all directions. You get coherent. You become your original coherent energy. So incoherence is when they're static and your energy isn't like a straight, clear note. Pretend I'm hitting a C on a keyboard. It's like, it's like one clear frequency. And when it's dissonant or incoherent, it's like static. It's not one clear note. And the more you reconnect in all the ways I've just described, and the more you get into the clearest original frequency of yourself, the natural byproduct of that is that all of your gifts and your abilities are going to come online. As you keep listening to yourself and responding, all of these gifts are going to come online. So I wonder if for you, if you've experienced any of this where you've taken action, you've listened deeply, and you've noticed things. I'm so curious. Did your gifts open up? Did you have wild synchronicities happen? Did you start having non-ordinary experiences? Because once you really get into this flow and plugged in, all of that starts to happen. Fascinating, isn't it? Wherever you are on your spiritual journey right now, in your own journey of awakening and learning to go deep within yourself and learn to listen and align and take courageous action, I just want to say I commend you. I honor you for honoring yourself, for doing the healing work, for awakening to your own potential. And I'm so glad you're here walking alongside me as I'm doing the same. And I'm so glad you're a part of this community. Thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you next time.